Welcome to another Top Grades Made Easy video. These 10 mistakes that so many students make are not inevitable and they're not difficult to fix. Let's check them out and see how you can learn not to make them. At number 1, we have the failure to write a thesis statement. In a thesis statement, you're saying what you think the author's main ideas are. You will be amazed at how many students don't bother doing this, and that limits them to a grade 6 or lower. The next problem is that in the thesis statement, they forget about the author's ideas and the author's purpose. Remember, the author isn't just writing this to tell a story. The story has more than one point to it, and those points are the author's ideas, what they want to convince you of or change your mind about. And you need those in your thesis statement. So a great thesis statement will have 3 parts to it, explaining each of those ideas really briefly. That also acts as an essay plan because you're going to prove those 3 ideas in the rest of your essay, which is therefore how you show the examiner you're writing a perceptive argument and you deserve at least a grade 7. Now, the next most important thing is that students think about the characters as though they are real people. So they will write about the author's idea about the character, but that limits you. The author has constructed the character. I'm using the quotation marks because these are the words that the examiners use. Characters are constructs. The idea being that we present a character in a particular way in order to demonstrate our ideas. So you've all either read or watched the movie of Scrooge and A Christmas Carol. So let's take Scrooge. Dickens constructs Scrooge in order to reveal his ideas about charity, greed, the Christmas spirit, looking after our fellow man, and the possibility of Christian redemption. Those are the author's ideas. They're the things that go in the thesis statement, and the characters are construct in order to help promote those ideas. Once you've got that nailed, you're easily at grade 7, grade 8, grade 9. Now, I told you about the importance of writing an argument. This gives you a big problem if you're doing an extract question. Because when you start with the extract, what you're effectively doing is saying, look, this is what I found in the extract, and here I am darting about to some other part in the text to show how that's similar to the extract, and now I'm going to dart somewhere else, and I want to dart somewhere else, which can feel very random. It doesn't put all your points in a logical order in order to create an argument, and if you're not writing an argument, it's really difficult to get grades 8 and 9. However, if we play that backwards, if you can write an argument, well then it's really easy to get grades 8 and 9, even for students with average ability. So how do I force myself to have an argument? Well, actually the answer is super easy. I am going to write chronologically. In other words, I'm going to go from the beginning of the text to the end of the text, and I'm going to pick out the significant moments as I go through. When I write chronologically, I can show how the author's ideas change, or the author's constructs, the characters, change in order to show a different aspect of the idea. So then it becomes really easy for me to write my argument. Just going to follow that character's journey or that theme's journey through the text, and bosh, I have an argument that's going to convince the examiner. Write chronologically, even if you're doing the extract. Where will you put the extract in? Well, wherever it appears in the text you're writing about. So you will fit it in at that very spot. Now, there are two words which are relevant to every single literature essay you ever write. One of them is society. That is going to be easy for you to fit in, and I'll show you how in a minute. And the second one is patriarchal or patriarchy, which is slightly more difficult, but I'm going to make it easier. So let's start with the idea of society. Every text ever written is a comment on the society at the time that the author is writing. So it's really easy when you're writing about the author's ideas to write about society of the time. Here's another really easy way. The author's ideas are relevant because they always, 100% of the time, want to change society. That's why they're writing this text. So once you decide what the author wants to change, it's really easy to say, this is what they want to change about society. There you are, the word is there all the time. Now, patriarchal means that this society is created for men by men, or at least it's a society in which men hold most of the power and influence. Why is that always going to be relevant? Well, all the texts that we study at GCSE are all written at a time when women had far fewer rights than men. Therefore, all the societies were patriarchal, and therefore every single text and every single author is writing either in support of that patriarchal society or against it. And you'll probably find that most of the time they are against patriarchal control. It doesn't matter which way you argue it, but arguing it one way or the other, using the word patriarchal automatically gets you into the top grades. This, in fact, is something that is so rare, I don't know if teachers aren't teaching it, but it's so rare in exam answers that I only ever see the word patriarchal and patriarchy used in grade 8 and 9 essays. I have never seen it, obviously it must happen, but I have never seen it in an essay that got a grade 7 or lower. So once you deal with these patriarchal ideas and the author's perception of those, you're automatically very top grades. The next thing is the number of quotes. So grade 8 and 9 essays tend to have at least 13 to 15 quotes in them. Sometimes they have way more, occasionally they have way less. The examiner's report says, well look, don't stress about quotes, we actually don't care. We examiners, we're just really happy for you to make references to the texts. Now, that is true, okay? But if you want to analyse the writer's ideas, word choice is super important. So at the top grades, it's really difficult to write about the word choice if you're not actually directly quoting. You can actually get the word wrong and the quote wrong, the examiners won't mind that, but you do need a bank of quotes. And the easiest way to do that is to say, well, let's say there are 5 themes and there are 5 characters. If I learnt 5 for each, that would give me 25 quotes for characters, 25 for themes, 50 quotes, way too much. So the sensible person will go, well, each quote that I pick for a character will also link to a theme, so the most I have to actually look at is 25, and actually then you can look at your characters and think, well, I'm just going to revise the top 3 and limit myself to 15 to 20. But however you do it, memorise quotes that you can stick in. Another easy tip, of course, is if my quotes are 1 or 2 words long, they're super easy to remember. So I'm going to try remembering short quotations. There is going to be another trick about the ending and the quotes from the end, which you'll see are so important later in one of the errors, the mistakes, the fatal mistakes that students make. The next mistake is context, and students tend to write about context as a thing. Now, By that I mean they suddenly interrupt the essay and say, this is really important because the context of the time was blah blah blah, and here's my paragraph about the context. And the examiners are like, no, I don't care about the context of the time, I care about the author's ideas. And so what I want you to do is use the context like a quote to back up the author's ideas. So if, for example, you're saying the author thought X about society, well, how are you going to prove it? With some context about stuff you know about society at the time. If you're going to say the author thought women ought to have more rights, then you're going to have some context about the rights of women at the time in contrast to the events in the text. See? Bring in your context like a quote in order to prove the author's ideas. Obviously, that always takes you back to the three big ideas in your thesis statement, and that always helps you show the examiner you're writing an argument. Top grades, please. Another thing that stops you writing an argument is focusing on the number of paragraphs and your paragraph structure. So teachers teach paragraph structures so that students won't leave important stuff out. But that isn't the same as writing a good argument. If you just fixate on how many peel paragraphs or petal paragraphs or pretzel paragraphs do I need, you're always relying on the paragraph to get you the mark. Now, it can do that, but under the pressure of the exam, that's a really inefficient way to work. The better way to work is to think, right, if I'm going to make an argument about the author's point of view, I'm obviously going to write about the beginning, because Mr. Salles told me to, and also that's where the author first introduces that view, and I'm going to follow it through chronologically to the end, where I'll see the final view. And so I'm not going to write about everything in the text, I'm just going to pick those moments that fit my argument about the author's big three ideas. So once I've picked those 8 moments, including the beginning and the end, I know that my argument is going to build. How many paragraphs will I need? It doesn't matter. I might do 2 paragraphs for each point or 1 paragraph for each point. Or, I mean, this is how mad essay writing can be. I might forget to paragraph in the exam and write it all as one massive paragraph from the first word to the last. The examiner will still say, fair enough. I won't. It's important to paragraph to make it easy for someone to read what you've written. And so each new idea is a new paragraph in the world of Mr. Salles, but in the world of the examiner simply doesn't care. So, construct an argument, pick your 8 moments from the text that are going to prove that argument. Don't worry about paragraph structures. Remember, if you're always writing about the author's ideas, you're always going to be getting top grades. And so a paragraph structure is only a kind of crutch or set of stabilizers that are going to help you get there to write about the author's ideas. But if you can do it in any way at all, the examiner's sweet with that, and so am I. Personally, I do not write in paragraph structures, and I do not teach my students to write in paragraph structures, and they can get 100%, and so can I. When I read top grade essays, grades 8 and 9 essays are hardly ever written with a paragraph structure. Grades 4, 5 and 6 often are, because the students fixate on, oh, I've got to have 3 paragraphs that look like this, and then they don't write an argument, they don't deal with the author's ideas, they don't get the grade. Number 9 is not writing about the ending. So often this happens with timing in the exam, but often it happens because the students don't realise how important the ending is. So put yourself in the shoes of an author. They spend ages trying to tie all the loose ends up in the end, not just of the plot, but also of their big ideas. It would be a catastrophe for them if you got to the end and the ideas didn't make sense anymore because stuff happened that proved the ideas wrong. No, everything that happens at the end is going to prove those ideas are right. So the ending is the most important part in the author's mind, and therefore it's the most important part in your essay. So when we go back to having 13 to 15 quotes, I'm going to memorise at least 3 and possibly more from the end, because I'll have one for each of the 3 big ideas that I started with in my thesis statement. So I'm going to have 3 quotes. They will be easy to find at the end of every text. Do that in your preparation, practice it in your revision, so that when you go into the exam, you already know what you're going to write about the ending. And this brings us to mistake number 10. Students often forget to write a conclusion. They don't use the words to conclude or in conclusion. And that's not just a superficial thing, it means they don't wrap up the arguments. So when you write a conclusion, obviously you're going to write about the ending because that's when the arguments are wrapped up. If your conclusion just does that, it's okay. But the danger of that is your conclusion will just repeat the ideas that are already in your essay. So actually you need a little bit of extra pizzazz in your conclusion, and you can get that in 2 ways. One, you can look at a further idea that you haven't dealt with yet in the essay but is suggested by your argument. Or 2, you can use a new quotation to end with. Both of those techniques work on their own or together, and it's then really easy to show the examiner that you understand all of the author's ideas, not just the 3 that you've dealt with. So for example, we go back to our keywords of society and patriarchal. It's going to be really easy for you to deal with the patriarchal element at the end if you haven't throughout the essay. This will be a new idea, a new perspective. It will show the examiner that you understand not just the whole text, but everything that's in the author's head, and it's much more likely that you'll get 100%. The next video, which is going to help you avoid any mistakes in your language exams, is what's coming up now.